The two main ideas I wanted to discuss today are interlinking, interlocked, inseparable ideas. And those are Plato's realm of ideas or forms, and the way that Aristotle viewed things. We're a bit removed from this archaic debate, but the ancient Greeks and their philosophy is the foundation of all modern thought, which is the second part of the discussion today. So how is this idea, over 2,000 years old, so fundamental to the way that we view things? Has it been employed in other cultures as a way of explaining our personal and professional development? And what would that look like applied in our own lives? So Plato had this idea of the forms, which means that in another world, in a realm separate from ours, there was a very clear idea of what everything should be. If there is a horse, for Plato, in this other realm, there's this perfect horse. And then all other horses sort of mimic the mold that, I guess, started it all. That everything, all horses at least, are modeled after. His student, Aristotle, railed against this, saying that there are no innate ideas. By that he meant there is no world of forms. Instead, he thought that everything that we knew had to be grounded in the senses. So, for instance, we could not have a dream about taking a walk through the park unless we had first experienced that walking through a park and all of the sensory stimuli that comes along with it. Birds chirping, fragrant flowers, and so on. Despite the nuances of the argument itself, the bigger item I wanted to discuss is the sort of didactic, response-based, language-centered reality we find ourselves in. That we can't really know anything without having first studied something else. And this is why revolutions tend to not work. So let's say there's someone in power whom you despise. Well, that, I guess, political entity is half of what you know, and the other half is more or less like the opposite of that. So you're still, at the end of the day, left with half an idea of how to run a country, or how to operate a business, or your marriage, or your personal life. You can only really gain ground by growing interpersonally. Someone who understood this was Bruce Lee. And you might see a lot of memes or internet quotes floating around from Bruce Lee, who said something strikingly similar to what would be the fusion of Plato and Aristotle, which again is the basis of all ancient and modern philosophy, which is learn the form, then forget the form. So take everything you can that's useful from each system, apply it, and then forget the rest. So, Plato was stuck on his ideas. So was Aristotle. Martin Luther was stuck on his ideas of faith alone. And these carry us forward in a sort of prison if we're unable to grow in such a way that can incorporate both ideas. The main, practice of Bruce Lee was Kung Fu. Kung Fu means merit and mastery. So there's some level of discipline over time needed in order to yield positive fruits of your labor. And in the martial arts system, one's goal is to best everyone in that style or discipline, showing that he has the best techniques. But like Bruce Lee liked to prove, that your hands are tied if you are solely focused on technique. We need to marry technique with creative ingenuity. And this is evident in world philosophies. You might think of someone like Hegel, who he himself did not have a firm philosophy, but created this sort of historiographical map of what he called world historic leaders who made important changes in the world. So in our modern times, we might think of someone like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, who are creating things that have yet to be created, but the basic car that Tesla is creating is based on Henry Ford's Model T. So we're always it's always a two-step process. So instead of having resentment for those who were forerunners in our industry or in history in general, we're better served to have deep reverence and respect for these individuals for having worked out some of the initial problems. To apply this in a business sense, let's say you came up in one company or organization, you decided that you can do it better, you strike out on your own, and nothing but confrontation, conflict, and competition follow. Well, with this sort of attitude, your only watermark is to be better than your competitor, not to master your craft, which should be your sole focus. Mastery plus merit, meaning acting with some level of virtue being the most perfect and basic versions of the ideas you're employing. So let's say you're in the hospitality sector, you would want to focus on service and cleanliness to a T. So really going the extra mile to you yourself, defining and embodying those ideals. Our ideals are ideas that we've turned into a pattern which can be replicated by others.